So it's 2025 and you've got a camera, or maybe just a dream of becoming a photographer. And for most photographers, the thought of where to start with all of this feels a little bit overwhelming. And let's be honest, the rabbit hole of gear reviews, camera tutorials, and imaging tips can swallow you whole. But here is the thing, photography doesn't actually have to be that complicated. Trust me, I've been there as an amateur photographer who started off only about 18 months ago. Out of the love of taking nice pictures, I'm going to show you exactly how to avoid all of the traps that myself and most amateurs fall into, and you're going to go from the position of being, hey, I've got no idea what I'm doing, to taking photos that you want to print and you want to show off and proudly hang up in your house. So instead of wasting months or even years chasing your own tail and spending so much money on camera gear that you don't even need, let me save you some time and money by giving you the few things that you need to start off doing when you start your photography career, so that we can get you taking stunning photos as quick as possible. So let's start with the most counterintuitive yet most crucial photography advice. Here is a hard truth that professional photographers know and amateur photographers try seemingly to ignore. Camera gear does not matter as much as you think it does, at least not in the beginning of your photography journey anyway. Any decent camera from the past decade will be more than sufficient. And I did this. I fell down the rabbit hole of wasting weeks watching reviews, agonizing over specs, and chasing the perfect setup, when all I really needed was a second-hand camera, a couple of lenses, and to go outside and actually do some photography. Think of it this way. Would you buy a Ferrari to learn to drive? Probably not, right? So instead of fixating on gear, grab a somewhat affordable setup, maybe a 24-70 lens paired with a used camera body, and go out there and get shooting. You're going to learn more from snapping imperfect pictures than endlessly scrolling through camera forums and watching YouTube camera reviews. So here are your next steps. Check out some marketplaces for some gently used cameras, find a versatile do-it-all lens like a 24-70 to start with, and commit to making the most of what you've got instead of chasing that next shiny, expensive upgrade. The real magic lies in your ability to see and capture moments, not the gear that you're holding 99.9% of the time. And speaking of lenses, let's dive into how to pick a lens that's not going to end up gathering dust in your camera bag. As a beginner, you might be tempted to buy every lens under the sun. And trust me, I've been there. I started off with 5 or 6 lenses, and now I have 2. That is it. I do all my work with 2 lenses. When I first started off taking photography a bit more seriously, I went from shooting landscapes and then obsessing over wildlife and then taking portraits of my dog and family. And before I knew it, I had a 100 to 400 lens collecting dust, I had a macro lens, I had all these different lenses all over the place, because eventually I shifted to primarily focusing on doing mountain photography. And quite frankly, you don't know what you're going to end up really doubling down on when you first start off as a photographer. I know for me, the idea of doing wildlife photography, there's loads of foxes where I am, there's loads of deer, and there's probably badgers and owls, and there's definitely an owl that lives somewhere around here because I hear it every single night, kind of wailing in the wind. But the idea of taking beautiful photos of all the local British wildlife really appeals to me. But the practicality of sitting in a bush or putting camo on and just sitting there for 4 hours hoping to see something, the reality of it means I'm never going to go and do it. I've tried it. It's not for me. So here is the trick when you first start off in photography. Start with one lens, a versatile lens like a 24-70. All the camera manufacturers have them. The third-party manufacturers do something similar as well. And it's going to work in most situations. And then as you go out and shoot more, which is the goal, right? More time out shooting actual photographs, then you're going to naturally discover what excites you. Maybe it's landscapes, maybe it's portraits, maybe it's macro photography. And only once you've been doing it 3-6 months, when you feel like you've got to the limit of that 24-70 lens, then you can start to invest in specialty lenses once you're sure that they're going to help you capture the shots that you now know that you want to take. So again, let's make this practical. Stick to a single lens for the first year if possible. Take photos in different scenarios, take pictures of your kids if you've got them, landscapes, pets, portraits, whatever it is, and see what sticks, see what you enjoy doing, see what you end up sharing with other people. And when you share it with people, they won't care. You're going to think it's a great photo. They're going to ask if you took it on your iPhone. But see what pictures you share the most, and then only upgrade when you find your niche and you feel genuinely limited by the current gear that you have. This approach is going to save you time, money, and importantly, buyer's remorse and regret as well. So now, if we followed that advice, we've got a camera, we've got a lens, how do we go about learning the techniques of photography quicker? Well, let me introduce you to the unsung hero of photography growth. If there is one thing that has skyrocketed my photography progress, it is working with a coach. A photography coach is like having a personal trainer, but specifically for photography. And my coach, Stuart McGlennon, who is one of the UK's top landscape photographers, didn't just teach me techniques, he helped me see opportunities for shots that I otherwise would have missed. He helped me edit photos. He helped me on a number of occasions when I've took a shot and I thought, well, that's kind of average, it's somewhat interesting. He proclaimed that it's actually a decent shot, and I would have otherwise just completely ignored those images and wouldn't have shared them to anyone else. I've learned more from Stuart in the past 12, 18 months or so than I could have ever learned from just reading books or even watching YouTube videos like this. And Stuart is a world-class photographer, right? But you don't need to work with someone necessarily who is famous or particularly pricey. Even local photographers or online mentorships can work great as well. When you're looking for a coach to help you improve your skill set, they've just got to be a few steps ahead of where you are. And that is it. And one good coach can condense years and years of your own trial and error into months of tangible improvement. And honestly, having someone like Stu who gives me very blunt and honest feedback, this is an absolute game changer. So if you want to find the right coach, look up some local photographers who are offering workshops, jump on some workshops and see if they will either formally or informally coach you after the fact. You could join an online community for photographers. These are less useful than a dedicated coach, but you can still get your work critiqued. And the biggest win, right, is to ask for some recommendations from people that you like their work, or find someone whose work inspires you and see if they can help you out with some definitely paid coaching. You don't want to be pestering people just to give you free advice. But yeah, ask them if they'll do some paid coaching with you. But hey, having said all that, if you're not ready for a coach just yet, there's another way to level up your skills, and it could be almost as powerful. Now, this might sound a little bit old school, but hear me out here. Studying photo books can train your brain to recognize patterns that make images good. And the more great photos that you see, the better your subconscious becomes at spotting potential shots when they're in front of you in real life. And I found that when I started flipping through photo books, I noticed something fascinating. I wasn't just appreciating the photos, I was starting to, inadvertently at first, but I was starting to learn why they worked. Things like leading lines, symmetry, and how light plays a role suddenly started to make sense. In fact, I have literally, here's one, Masters of Landscape Photography. I've literally loads of these books all around the studio. And one thing that I've found from looking at these books regularly, I just pick them up throughout the day, right? One thing that I found at the beginning of 2025 as I record this video is that a lot of the pictures in these books don't actually have the epic light that I always assume that I need to have to take a good photo. This has kind of reset my brain slightly as to the quality of the light that I have to see in front of me to take my camera out of my bag. It's encouraged me, it's motivated me to start taking more pictures in poorer light to see if there is still interesting shapes, textures, scenes that I can pick out from that less than perfect environment. So choose a genre and pick up some books from the experts in that space. Spend a few minutes daily just analysing, even just looking at the composition, the colours, and depending on the genre of photography, the storytelling in each image. And try to take some of that inspiration with you into your next shoot. And then I guess look back at the photographs you've taken and see how it's influencing your work. It's like feeding or training a creative muscle. And when you pair this with the next step, the results can be remarkable. Photography is like any other art form. It thrives on creativity, but some rules lay at the foundation of everything that gets built upon it. And mastering these rules will fast track your improvement as a a beginner. Think of it like learning to drive. You've got to understand how the gear shifter works, the pedals, the wheel. You've got to understand the rules of the road, that you've got to stay in the lane. You've got to understand how to parallel park before you go to a racetrack. Unless you're Lewis Hamilton, he was probably doing all of this before he learned to drive. But for most people, you've got to do all the foundations before you go to a racetrack and start ripping it round bends. So rules like the rule of thirds, leading lines, and framing your images to give it some structure, get all of this nailed. And then once you've got the hang of these rules, you can start to understand when you want to bend or even break them to create something unique or interesting. For example, the rule of thirds says that you should place your subject off center on one of the lines of thirds to create a more dynamic, interesting composition. But sometimes breaking this rule, like centering your subject, can make the subject a hero within the shot, and it can make it even more impactful. So if you want to learn some of these foundational rules of photography, well, first off, watch some videos or take a beginner photography course that explains composition, lighting, that side of things. Then go out and proactively practice these rules. Do this deliberately. Try to practice them so they really sink into your brain. Take photos with the rule of thirds in mind, and then compare them to the same scene but with the subject in the center of the shot. And gradually start to experiment with perhaps breaking or bending some of these rules to find your creative voice. Because learning these principles when you first start off in photography, it's going to give you control. It's going to allow you to take control of the scene, the subject, the lighting, rather than what most amateur photographers do, which leads to masses and masses of frustration, which is just leaving things up to chance. And 1 in every 100 pictures is decent. That keeps you going. Whereas when you learn the rules, you're going to be 50-60% of shots are half decent. And then you can improve those numbers even further by adding more rules and foundations on top of the basics, or just breaking the rules altogether. And if you're ready to unlock even more potential, let's talk about where you should invest your time and your money. Here is the secret that most beginner photographers absolutely completely miss. Great photos don't come from necessarily expensive camera equipment. They come from being in the right place at the right time. So instead of splurging on that new $2,000 lens, spend your money on experiences that allow you to go and take epic or meaningful photos. This doesn't mean necessarily blowing your savings on a safari, but that might actually be a good place to start. You can instead start small. Drive to a local park, take a weekend road trip, or visit a nearby city, wherever you want to shoot, the environment that you need to be in to get those shots that you crave, those shots that you aspire to take. Try and get out of your comfort zone and immerse yourself in some diverse environment. You will absolutely improve your photography faster by spending a little on camera gear and a lot on travel and new experiences versus a lot on camera gear and not very much money and just sitting around in your bedroom or your living room watching videos about other photographers who are going out and getting the shots that you aspire to get. Photography as a art form, well, it thrives on new perspectives, and you can't capture those from your back garden. So I encourage you, pause this video if you like, but what are you doing this weekend? Maybe you can plan a day trip up to a scenic location if you're into landscape photography like me. Go and see a new beach or a mountain, or maybe just go and hang out somewhere in your neighborhood during golden hour. Heck, in 2025, if you're able, and to be quite frank, knowing the demographics of the audience that watch this channel, almost all of you are absolutely able to do this. Budget a small amount, if not a large amount, but at least a small amount for travel. Even if it's just petrol money or public transport or a few hotel stays, just to get out and go and see some interesting places. And prioritize taking photos over, watching YouTube videos on perfecting your camera settings. Get off your ass, get out there, take some shots. Your intuition is going to grow with practice. Your skill set is going to grow with practice. And speaking of that magic word practice, let's tackle the single most effective habit that in the past 18 months or so has transformed my photography skills. This step to improving your photography in 2025 might be the most important. And weirdly, it can be the hardest, right? Because you can read all the books and watch all the videos and tutorials, but nothing is going to replace consistent practice. And when I committed to going out at least once a week to take photos, no matter the weather, or most importantly, most of the time, no matter whatever my mood was, or whatever excuse I had in that moment in time, I had a dramatic improvement in my skill set as a photographer. I'm not saying I'm world class by any means, but I'm pretty decent considering I've been doing this for 18 months now. And here is why getting out once a week, at least once a week, works. It forces you to deal with the real world variables that derail most amateur photographers. You're going to learn how to handle changing light, tricky composition, and quite frankly, in the UK, imperfect weather conditions. These are all things that no online course can prepare you for. And trust me, this process then becomes addictive. Each successful shoot fuels your motivation for that next session. And then there might be 2 or 3 weeks where you get absolutely, especially with landscape photography, we get absolutely nothing. Then the 3rd, 4th week, you get some amazing light, and it creates this feedback loop and this momentum. I find that each shoot that I go out on, whether it is successful or it isn't successful, depending on the quality of the photos that I get from it, leads to more motivation to go out again and again and again. It leads to more motivation to continue that process so that I don't essentially break the chain of productivity. And here's a few tips that I found that helps me make this stick. Choose a consistent day and time to go out, like a Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, whatever it is. One afternoon a week where no matter the weather, no matter, unless, someone's dying or there's a family emergency, one day of the week where you can go out and actually do some photography. Next, keep your gear packed and ready to go to minimize the friction of getting your arse out of the door. And then maybe invite a friend to join you on these trips. That'll help you with the accountability or just increase the amount of fun that you have as you go out. And as I said, over time, this habit creates a really positive feedback loop. The more you go out, the better your photos get. You see the gap from where you were at the beginning of the year to where you are right now, and you see that improvement, you see that growth. So you don't stagnate, you don't drop photography as a hobby, and it's going to inspire you to take more and better photos for years and hopefully decades to come. So there you have it, 7 steps to kickstart your photography journey in 2025. And if you want to continue leveling up your photography skills, why not click the video that's on the screen right now?